Welcome back, everyone, to the Point of Order podcast, an inside look at California politics and the state legislature. I'm your host, Assemblyman Josh Hoover, and today we have joining us again, Assemblyman Juan Alanis from Assembly District 22, Modesto, Turlock. How's it going, Juan?
Good, Josh. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming back. I'm glad we didn't scare you off.
You didn't. We probably could have kept going on that one.
I know. That one, last episode was a long one.
We did We'll keep it shorter this time.
We'll keep it shorter this time. But yeah, no, it's really, really good to have you back on. We'll jump right into it today because I know we've got a lot going on these next couple weeks with end of session. The legislature is ramping up and then ending pretty quickly here, September 14th. So we've got a lot to talk about today, including previewing some of the bills that we're going to see over the next couple weeks. So we'll get to that in a moment. But first, we're going to do a weekly recap. This first story off the top is kind of our ongoing stories about the city of San Francisco and the struggles that they're having. A pretty sad one, actually. A San Francisco store clerk was attacked in a robbery, died from his injuries. Really, I mean, I hate to say it like this, but it's just another example, right, of kind of the decay that we're seeing in the city of San Francisco and what I personally would like to avoid seeing in my own cities. And so, and we're going to get into some bills later that are leading to this sort of outcomes. But yeah, just wanted to touch on that really quick. I don't know if you've got any thoughts.
So I'm not sure if you know or not, but I had a bill that actually was to study retail theft with the little Hoover Commission. And I don't know if you know, we did a jailbreak on that.
Yeah, so what happened with that? Tell me about it.
So it's going.
Okay.
We were able to get enough signatures from the Assembly and the Senate side to where they were going to push forward with it and actually do the study. So hopefully maybe by next session, you and I will actually have data to actually speak on.
That'd be great.
Our colleagues on the other side are always telling us the data says. Well, nobody has the data on what Prop 47 as far as retail theft has done to Californians and small businesses. So now we're going to have that.
That's great.
And unfortunately, as you mentioned, the San Francisco incident where the owner was killed is just going to add more to that data and give us more talking points to bring up and actually show them, look, this is really
these are the results of the policies, right?
Correct. Yeah. A failed policy.
Yeah. That bill got out of the Assembly Public Safety Committee, right?
Yes.
But then what happened to it?
So then it got shelved in appropriations.
Okay, got it.
So it gets shelved in appropriations, and who's one of the first ones to actually sign on? It's the chair of appropriations.
Wow.
Which is kind of like, wait a minute, but you shelved it. Why did you?
So is it in the Senate now, or what's?
No. So now, it just goes straight. They're going to start doing it.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that was first time. I'm new to this. I didn't know jailbreak was the thing here, but
that's pretty good, great news. I mean, I know there was like an audit that the audit committee passed to on Prop 47. I'm forgetting the name of the author off the top of my head, but yeah, it's we definitely need the whole thing about data too is really annoying to me because when you are decriminalizing crime and you're basically saying, this is no longer considered a crime, and yet it's still happening, right? I mean, that's kind of skewing the data too, right?
It's very skewing. Well, now that it's not a crime,
you can't then say, "Oh, look, all these crimes aren't happening anymore because we reclassified them as non-crimes."
And that's what's happening right now. Wow, we had a decline in crime. Well, yeah, we did because it's not a crime anymore.
Yeah, it's quite the. It's quite the veil that they're trying to put over everyone's eyes. It's pretty frustrating.
Hopefully the rest of California sees it.
Yeah. Our second story here, Governor Newsom signed an executive order to develop a master plan for career education. Now, on the one hand, I'm a huge supporter of career education. I think, and I actually appreciate him calling it career education in this because oftentimes we refer to it as career technical education, but I think sometimes that's a little limiting, right? It makes it sound like a certain type of thing, but really we're talking about educating people for careers that may not involve a college degree, right? So the governor signed this executive order. I think we'll see if it has any impact or not. I think it's a nice way for him to talk about career education, but I do appreciate, the effort at least to try to increase this in California.
So I have an education bill, AB 255. It goes along with this in a sense. So hopefully this will help as well with him maybe signing mine one day soon. First responders getting priority registration into colleges. So right now there's a bill on the books from last session before you and I came up here that said that first responders or law enforcement have to have a bachelor's degree.
Okay. Okay.
By the by the time they're 25. Well, okay. So now what about these communities that have these officers that are in that criteria that can't get those degrees now? So now you let them go. You tell them, you know what, go try and get your education. Where say they're trying to get it. Say they haven't been to college in a couple of years. Priority registration, they don't have it. So they have to be put on a waiting list, or they have to go later. So this is just one way to kind of make a right on this one and at least give them priority registration so they can actually follow what that bill is saying. So that way communities don't do without their public safety officers. So we'll see how that
does
goes.
it actually prohibit them from being law enforcement officers until the degree's completed?
They have to have the degree.
Wow. I think this will be interesting. I mean, the funny thing is I actually had a bill this year that I had co-authored or joint authored with the chair of the Assembly Education Committee to increase funding for career technical education. And I think right now, I think it was going to increase it from 300,000 to 400. Well, see, I don't even remember my own numbers off my own bill right now.
We have a lot of numbers to remember.
I know, but basically, it would have increased it by about 50% per year. And I just, that actually got held in appropriations, which we're going to get to that topic in a couple minutes. But I do think we need to make career technical education or career education a bigger priority in California, particularly for the kids. Obviously we want kids to have access to college and, to get a 4-year degree if that's the track that they're on. But there's a lot of kids that may not be on that track. And we still want them to have successful careers, right? And what good, careers that actually, help you to afford life in California and raise a family and all those good things. So definitely want to see our state prioritize this more. Especially for the kids that might not be on the college track.
Well, the way our state's going with affordability, you have to have one almost to the point, unless you're one of those kids that don't need a degree that have made good on their own, which is very rare. But fortunately, California is getting more expensive, and it's definitely going to be something that's needed for them to succeed. Totally.
And there's so many skills and trades that you can learn out there that, that those jobs pay very good wages, right? And a lot of it, to me, at least the focus of my bill was more on the high school side of things, is like we need to expose students to those opportunities and those possibilities when they're in high school, so that then they know kind of what their options are going into community college or coming out of high school, right?
And those are great points, because you need to get to them when they are young. So I have so many examples I can give you, but I'll just give you a couple, like with Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Usually if you get a young man that starts as like a 14 or 15, you're usually not going to get him to stay in Boy Scouts that long, because they're going to get driver's license. They learn these things called girls, things like that. Whereas if you get them when they're younger as Cub Scouts, they have that buy-in and they want to reach to that Eagle Award, Eagle Scout rank. And that's usually get them younger. Same thing with the high schools. In my area, we have a great law enforcement program. I was part of that. Yeah. Look, I just retired from the sheriff's office. So I'm a product of that. My son is a product of that.
That's cool.
My oldest. And now even my other son, in his high school, they had a nursing school program. And now he's a nurse at one of our local hospitals. So those things are very proven in my family that they work. And I've actually seen people also get into it and decide, this isn't for me. So instead of them wasting all their time, money, and resources on a career that they end up not liking, they find out early, this isn't for me. I'm going to go a different route.
And sometimes that's just as important as figuring out you like it, right? It's good thing I didn't sink too much time into this.
I have a family member. She's got a degree, a teaching degree.
Yeah.
She works for PG&E.
And
I think she's still paying on her student loan. So it's like, she probably wished she would have maybe got a little bit more into the teaching thing and said, this isn't for me.
Yeah, that's tough. I honestly, being a teacher right now has got to be so tough too. I mean, I'm sure there's people that even love to teach that are probably saying, maybe I don't want to be a teacher right now, which is unfortunate because we desperately need teachers. But the education space right now is, especially post COVID, with all the learning loss and the kids are so far behind and there's so much going on. It's a really tough time to be a teacher.
It is.
Definitely shout out to all of our teachers out there that are still hanging in there. So usually we do our clip of the week later in the show, but I'm actually going to use it today to just set up our next conversation here. This will be a short one.
No! Do we need SB 553? No! Do we need SB?
All right, so that was a very brief clip from our rally last week. And
it was huge.
Hundreds of small business owners, hundreds of crime victims, and just Californians, right? That came out to.
I think that rally alone should just show people, like we say, enough is enough, right? And I'm so happy and proud they showed up, and just the energy of people, like they're tired of this. We're tired of being victimized by our own government, saying that no, it's okay that people can come and steal from us after I worked so hard, my family's worked so hard to get where we are, just so people can come take advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a rally to oppose a number of pieces of legislation that are moving through the legislature that I think will increase crime in California and put small business owners in a really bad position when it comes to combating retail theft. And we'll get to those bills here in a moment in our looking ahead segment. So this is kind of a mashup here because we're recapping the approps hearing from last week. That was our suspense hearing. It's kind of this, obviously, as this infamous hearing every year where bills either, move out or die. Basically.
Mostly die.
The Appropriations Committee is like very unique, right, in the Assembly from the standpoint of when you send a bill to a policy committee, the committee discusses it and then they vote on it and it's kind of an up or down vote. But in the Appropriations Committee, your bill gets flagged or tagged with a certain fiscal cost that can put it on the suspense file, which is essentially saying this bill is it has a certain cost to the state. And so it has to go through this extra process where it has to get released from the suspense file. The problem is that really all happens behind closed doors, and we really never know what's going to happen. It's a very, very weird process. And I know there have been some attempts to reform that over the years that have failed, but
they say it's to streamline it. Make it go quicker.
Yeah, to that point, so the Senate Appropriations Committee and the Assembly Appropriations Committee met on Friday. The Senate Appropriations Committee dispensed with 489 bills just in that one hearing.
Wow.
And its Assembly counterpart dispensed with 276 bills in that single hearing. And so from that standpoint, it's a ton of bills, but I would still appreciate more transparency.
Well, yeah, and if you look at us, hey, we got voted in here to work, like not to cut corners.
Yeah,
let's work. I mean, we have all this time left for the rest of the calendar year that we could be using, but we're cutting it in 2 weeks.
Did you? By the way, before we get in, so we're going to recap the top 10 bills here, but before we do that, did you see that they were like doing trivia questions in the Senate Appropriations Committee before?
Was it about Friends?
There was a Friends trivia.
And the only reason I know is because my staff had told me, because they were asking us the questions too.
We were just talking about the show Friends on the way over here too, which is kind of funny. But no, the chair of the committee was like asking random trivia questions, and one of them was, you'll probably know this one, was what is Chandler Bing's middle name from Friends?
You know what? And it was even said on my text. My wife had answered it. I don't remember it.
Yeah, it's Muriel.
There we go.
Yeah.
I remember they were asking how many times had Ross been married, and it was 3.
Yeah, exactly.
3 times.
But I mean, that was so bizarre to me because like apparently they had to take a bunch of breaks and they had to fill. I mean, that was very weird. I didn't really understand what was going on there. But anyway,
well, it was unique.
It's a little unique is a nice way to put it. I'm not sure we need trivia in our appropriations hearings, but So I wanted to recap the top 10 bills to watch for end of session this year that most of them just got out of the Appropriations Committee, but some of them are working through in different committees right now. And so, and I want to preface it by saying it's impossible to pick 10 bills. So if you don't hear a bill on this list and you're listening like, why isn't this, but this bill's really important. Why isn't this bill on there? It could have easily been on this top 10. And I just, had to pick 10. So, or chose to pick 10. So off the top, number 10, AB 645. Did you see this? So this bill is basically a pilot project that's going to authorize the use of speed cameras to catch speeders in a number of large cities. And off the top of my head, I don't remember all the cities, but one of them's LA, and there's a couple others.
Well, I don't know all the details about this, but I'm wondering if they're going to run into the same problems they did with like the red light cameras, which went up in our area, and now they're all down. Yeah, they didn't really do. They caused, I think, more issues than they did anything as far as technicalities went. Yeah,
I didn't know if this went through public safety. Maybe it was just transportation.
I would think it would have, but I don't recall this one.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. It's in the Senate right now. I know we're hearing a lot from law enforcement, and as a law enforcement officer, you might be able to attest to this, that they just don't have, at least in my city, right? They don't have the capacity right now to really do traffic enforcement. And so, I mean, they're obviously addressing larger, not to diminish traffic violations, but they're addressing larger crime issues.
Yeah,
right?
we need to have officers answering phone or answering reports and getting to calls of people calling 911 instead of pulling people over for speeding right now, because the staffing levels are low. Just like we mentioned for teachers.
Yeah, staffing's an issue, and I'm hearing that it's that combined with kind of the other challenges with what they're having to retail theft and some other issues. At least in my city, they're saying like, yeah, we know people are speeding, but it's really difficult for us to focus resources on traffic.
And that's actually the only division that actually generates a revenue with the traffic tickets for the cities or for the counties. And you would think that would be a priority for them. Like, hey, this is how you're going to get more money to get more officers, whatever. But
yeah,
it's answering to calls in progress.
Yeah,
and that's what they'd rather do instead of doing the traffic part. So you get the little signs that say slow down, and that's pretty much it.
So do you think this pilot project is a good idea? Or I know there's a lot of privacy concerns with it. I think that would be one of the concerns I would have. But, I mean, would it be helpful, I guess, to law enforcement is the question.
Well, it definitely would as far as the cameras go, but I'm still skeptical about it as well, because I know LPRs, license plate readers, people were fighting that left and right, but it's a great investigative tool. I don't know if they're going to try and say the same thing with these speed cameras or not, but I'm curious. And just like in any industry where they're saying they're being replaced by robots or anything like that, they have their problems with it. But at some point, technology, we need to use it when we can.
Yeah, and this doesn't seem to be replacing anyone, as it does seem like it's assisting, right? Like the current levels of enforcement.
And they could probably bring like a civilian in on these and just process these through and go that route. They do it all the time on other things.
Yeah. So that'll be an interesting one. I added this one to the list partially because I've been hearing a lot from my constituents lately about how many drivers are speeding right now, and just like the post-COVID road issue has gotten worse apparently. I don't know. I don't know if you've noticed that. That's very anecdotal, I feel like, but I mean, wouldn't totally shock me.
Correct.
Number 9, AB1. We've talked about this on the podcast before. Unionizing legislative staff. That actually has been killed in the Appropriations Committee. Like the last 2 or 3 times it's been tried. This time it got out, and we'll be heading to the Senate floor. That'll be interesting to watch.
So I'm a co-sponsor. If
you are, yeah, you are.
And we've talked about it. I mean, it's not fair that just because you have Republicans that represent a district that they have less staff as opposed to a district that has a Democratic representative. It should be equal across the board.
Yeah. It's interesting, too, because from an institutional standpoint, I'm not sure if this bill is going to be great. But that being said, the hypocrisy of, the legislature really forcing unionization on a number of different industries. I mean, bills that we've talked about on this podcast, and yet themselves rejecting unionization.
What's good for me and good for you,
pretty unbelievable.
Yes.
Yeah. And so from that standpoint, I think that, I think the legislature needs to actually practice what it preaches in some ways, right?
And we'll see if it happes.
So, yeah. But I mean, this is the farthest it's ever got.
We might be part of history on this.
So that'll be an interesting one to see if it moves out of the Senate. Number 8, we've talked about this on the podcast as well, AB 316 on autonomous trucks, basically requiring that a driver be present in a vehicle pretty much in perpetuity, even as autonomous technology takes off. Obviously, a number of driver union interests, labor folks support this bill for protecting jobs. You have a lot of tech folks that oppose this bill because they believe it will chill advancement in the technology and increase costs and things like that. Interestingly, the governor came out last week or a week before and said he opposes this bill. So I'm really interested to see how that plays out. I mean, it could get to his desk, but ultimately he could veto it. He seemed to have signaled that he plans to veto it if it gets to him. So
interesting.
But it did get out of the Appropriations Committee. So we'll see how it fares in the Senate.
I wonder what the price was on that.
That's a good question.
Appropriation, because like one of my bills added 2 words to a law, and it was like over $1 million. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
2 words. For 2 words.
Some expensive words.
So I'm wondering, So I'm wondering what is that?
I don't know. I'd have to look that one up. Number 7, I kind of cheated on this one because it's like multiple bills.
Yeah, I was wondering. That's a lot.
But I mean, it's like, they would pretty much take up the whole list if I would. But there were a number of fentanyl bills that advanced out of the Appropriations Committee. Just to list them really briefly, you have AB 33, which would establish a task force to address addiction and overdoses. AB 474, which would promote cooperation between state and local officials on fighting fentanyl trafficking. AB 701, which would increase fines for dealers by putting fentanyl in the same category as heroin and cocaine. AB 890 by our colleague Joe Patterson, which would require defendants granted probation for fentanyl-related crimes to complete drug education programs. And then SB 19, which would create an anti-fentanyl abuse task force. Those are the ones that passed. There's a couple that also were killed. But, I mean, again, I think these are all good. I think this is good news that these are all moving forward.
It's going in a better direction. Unfortunately, the ones that were killed would have been really, really good.
Yeah. But that's kind of the thing that's frustrating. I mean, I feel like the ones that they let out, this list of bills, it's like the easiest bills to let out.
Correct.
I mean, it's like, guys, we need to actually go after traffickers and we need to actually go after dealers, but we're not.
And at the same time, they can say, well, we did let some fentanyl bills out. Yeah, but those were like low-level fentanyl bills. We want the ones that are going to actually hold some consequences to people.
Exactly. And I can kind of see it now. Like, we let out, I don't know how many 7 or 8 bills to address the fentanyl crisis. But if all of them have a 1 to 3% impact on the crisis, you're not really doing a whole lot, right? Like,
it's lip service more. Is what it is.
We got to stop the tide of actual fentanyl coming to our communities, and I think that's where these bills probably fall a little short. So, but good all the same. I mean, education is obviously important.
It's better than nothing, I guess you could say.
I find it somewhat reactionary to the crisis that continues to grow. But I mean, we obviously want to educate people.
Well, and next year we'll be talking about Trank.
Yeah.
We've already tried including it in some of them. It's like, you already know it's here. Why not include it now? Why wait? Because we're always government is always chasing it. As a law enforcement officer with all these new drugs that keep coming on, and me not being able to charge because we haven't caught up to it yet. It's like, we already know this is coming. Why don't we put this on the books now so we can get ahead of it?
Well, and it is so slow because if we talk about it next year, it won't get implemented until 25,
yes.
right?
And then there'll be something else.
I mean, you're talking about a year and a half from now that you would even, and that's assume something passes next year, which is a big assumption in this legislature. The trank thing, though, is crazy. It's I mean, obviously fentanyl is very deadly, but the people that are using trank and like what it does to you is very, very bizarre.
Well, and Narcan is not supposed to be effective against it.
Yeah, so it's in some ways it's like
so like all these Narcan bills that we have that we're trying to, maybe they do move away from fentanyl. Now it goes to trank. Okay, now all these Narcans are useless.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, well, I'm sure that'll be a topic we're talking about in the coming months for sure. Number 6, SB 525. This is the healthcare worker minimum wage increase to $25. This bill did move out of the Appropriations Committee, which I know is kind of a question mark whether that was going to happen. But this means it now becomes a pretty huge floor fight in the Assembly. And that's going to be really interesting to see. I know that, I mean, you represent a little bit more rural area, and I know that we've already lost a hospital in Madera down in one of our colleagues' districts. To me, this is going to lead to that as well.
So I have 4 hospitals.
Okay. Have you heard from any of them about this one?
They're against this. Like, they're like, how's this going to happen? How are we going to be able to afford all this? And
same in my district.
They're not for this. They were hoping it was going to not make it through appropriations.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where the Assembly falls on it. I think it's going to be an interesting new test for or a big test for our new speaker.
Definitely. And so a lot of this, what it comes down to is collective bargaining. That's why you have collective bargaining. You individually, like, one point that has been made is, okay, so say it's $25 across the board, right? Well, you may have some low income areas that's more than what they can afford to do. Whereas you have, like, say, Los Angeles, Orange County area, $25, no problem. So how could you do this across the board? It should be district specific or collective bargaining. This is all part of contract negotiations is what it should be.
I mean, I think that's what gets left out of the minimum wage discussion all the time, right? Is, obviously, having minimum standards is a good thing, right? I mean, they're there to be a minimum, right? But this idea that, every region can afford an increase of this magnitude, I think is really, it's very flawed from an economic standpoint. And I mean, we have regions in our state that are actually affordable and, you can actually afford housing. Maybe your wages are a little bit lower, but it makes sense in that region. Mm-hmm. And then you've got, your urban cores that obviously have much higher wages. I think we need to allow for that diversity of, economic diversity, I guess you could call it.
No one size fits all for us here in California. We're a huge state.
Yeah.
Now, if we were maybe cut up in little pieces, okay, then do it that way, but they're not.
Yeah, so that's going to be a really interesting test in the next couple weeks. We've got number 5 on the list here, SB 799, unemployment insurance for striking workers. This one actually wasn't an approps bill, but it did pass the insurance committee last week. Sorry. So Assembly Insurance passed this out, and it still needs to head through a number of hurdles before it gets through to the governor's desk. But I think this one is going to be another one. There's a big push on from labor this year, and I am opposed to this bill. I've said that on this podcast. I think it's a real. I think it sends a really bad message, particularly when our unemployment insurance fund is about $18 billion in the hole that our employers in California, our small businesses, are going to be paying back.
Small businesses are going to get hurt again.
I mean, this is just, it's just another blow to them and their livelihoods.
Big blow.
So that'll be an interesting one to watch. Number 4, SB 14, huge win, I think, for Shannon Grove and our caucus. basically making human trafficking of a minor a serious felony in California. I think most people I tell about this bill, they're like, what do you mean?
Why
what
isn't it already?
About?
Like,
yeah.
Yes.
Wait, it's not a serious felony? It's like, yeah, it's
kind of ridiculous that we had to do this just to make that.
And in the fight
for it, yes, just to change that.
We couldn't even change it. We had to fight to change it. But major props to Senator Grove for just her persistence on this and willingness to keep fighting.
Yeah, and also just for everybody out there that caught wind of this and we're sharing it and we're fighting as well outside of the Capitol.
Yeah. Well, and so that'll now move to the Assembly floor, which I'm pretty hopeful. I don't know how you feel. I'm pretty hopeful we'll pass it.
I think it will. I think just seeing Public Safety Committee go back and vote on it again, and at least out of the 6, at least 4 did go on it. So that's very promising, I think, for our floor.
Sent a good signal.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but these top 3 here are the ones that our rally was about. And I'm sad to report they all got through Appropriations Committee. Our rally last week was basically calling on these 3 bills to be defeated or held on submission in the Appropriations Committee so that they did not move forward to the floor. They all did. So number 3, we've got, and I'll just say them all, and then we can talk about them as a group. But SB 553 puts small business owners on the front lines of stopping crime. A bunch of new mandates that are placed on them when it comes to addressing crime in their stores. Number 2, SB 81, expanding eligibility for early release from prison. And number 1, SB 94, which allows parole consideration for criminals sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. You saw all these bills, right, in Public Safety Committee, I believe?
Yes, I'm pretty sure we saw all these.
So, I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about these coming before you on the assembly floor? Are you going to be speaking out on these, or?
I'm pretty sure I'm going to be, just with my background, at least be able to speak and attest to a lot of this. It's shocking that I guess it's not shocking that it made it this far. But just especially your number 1, SB 94, these people were sentenced to life without parole. And
what kind of crime is that you'd have to commit to get life without the possibility of parole? It has to be a very heinous,
serious crime on that one. I mean, you're talking murder, you're talking maybe kidnapping, maybe some.
I didn't get that. Could you try
Oh,
again?
Siri wants to be on the podcast.
Siri wants to be on the podcast. No, sorry. It has to be a very serious crime. And at the time, say this was 20 years ago, say you and I had a family member and we were fighting really hard for them to get life without parole, and all this stuff was negotiated just to have them do that. And then to find out 20 years later, all that negotiating and all that working really hard that the DA's office did, that everybody put into it, law enforcement included, was for nothing.
Yeah.
And at the time, the families were like, okay, well, that's the justice that we're going to get. That's the justice for our loved one that may not be here anymore, or that is now in a wheelchair or is maimed or whatever it is. At the time, okay, that's the justice we get, just to find out that, oh, you know what? Government's saying all that work you guys put into it now is for nothing. We're going to let this person out.
Yeah. I mean, zero respect for victims, in my opinion. And I mean, at our rally, we had a number of victims that spoke about, how their son or their daughter were killed. They fought to get justice for them. And then years later, the legislature is trying to undo that justice that was pretty fairly passed out, right? But this is not justice. It's interesting because our legislature talks a lot about, criminal justice reforms, but part of justice is actually, getting a consequence that meets the crime. This is not that, right?
Well, and you also need to remember even further back, the consequence at one point was the death penalty. They took that off the table, so then life without parole was the next thing. And where's it going to stop? Where's it going to end?
Yeah. The other thing I would mention too that none of these bills really address, so SB 94 and SB 81 specifically, basically SB 81, by the way, basically just says we should presume that someone is eligible for release unless there's some like limited criteria that does not allow for that, right, in the bill. So basically just presuming that people are rehabilitated, which to me seems you should have to show that you're rehabilitated. Mm-hmm. I think what frustrates me about these top two bills here is there's nothing in the bill that talks about rehabilitation or about showing rehabilitation or progress or anything like that.
It's just like giving a pass, kind of like with our kids when there's like, we're going to pass you to the next grade. No, you need to take your test. You need to actually show that you're going to be able to go to the next grade. Now we're doing it with inmates.
I mean, it's just, obviously we want to rehabilitate people, but we got to know that they've been rehabilitated before we're letting them out for these heinous crimes. And there's some people that you can't, correct. But I think that's the point, right? Is some of these people cannot be rehabilitated, so they need to stay in prison so that they don't create more victims.
And to keep our community safe that way.
Exactly. And others, may be working towards rehabilitation, which is great.
And there are some success stories from those. I have some just in my district that have actually opened nonprofits and I remember I even asked one of them, like, what made you different from the others? He's like, well, because I actually wanted to do something better. I actually had to make the effort, whereas the others just want the handout. And if they don't get the handout, then it's like, then just let me out.
Yeah, it's a mess. A lot of those business owners you heard in that clip, or a lot of those protesters or rally attendees that you heard in that clip were small business owners. Mm-hmm. So this bill, SB 553, just to give a little more information on it, requires most employers to adopt an annual workplace violence prevention plan, requires certain levels of employee training, requires them to maintain a violent incident log, requires them to communicate about workplace violence and identify and correct certain hazards. I mean, I find this all super interesting that on the one hand, our legislature is pushing bills to let people out of prison that aren't rehabilitated and potentially go back into our communities and commit crime. And on the other hand, requiring businesses, mandating that businesses do take all of these actions to protect themselves against the policies that their own legislature is passing that's making them less safe and making them more vulnerable. I mean, it's completely backward to me.
And these businesses are already having a hard time making ends meet, staffing, everything else. And now, by the way, you got to do all this too now.
It's no wonder that we had, hundreds of, business owners come out and say enough is enough.
Yes.
How about you actually enforce laws in this state? How about you actually, fund law enforcement officers and, first responders? How about you actually change policies in California that keep people that are going to commit these crimes locked up, or at least ensure there will be consequences for stealing from businesses, instead of now putting the burden on us to somehow protect our own, tell us how to protect our own establishments.
So we're basically punishing people for doing what is right, trying to live the American dream, trying to prosper, trying to take care of their families. The message that California is sending them is, why are you doing that? Just go commit crimes and then we'll reward you another way.
Yeah, it's frustrating. All three of these made it, moved forward, but hopefully, the assembly floor, there's still a shot there that some of our colleagues have a chance to vote these down. So we're continuing to hope that will happen, but definitely put pressure on your legislators if they're not one of us who have clearly opposed these already.
Otherwise, our offices are going to get flooded with calls.
You can call us, but we're opposed. So we're telling you now. And we will be voting no on these. Again, if the bill that you care about didn't make this top 10, this could have been probably a completely different top 10. That's how many bills that we're going to be seeing over the next couple weeks. There is a huge wildfire and life insurance and wildfire legislation that's still kind of pending.
Or even some people could have went completely different with parental rights.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of parental rights bills. I mean, we could have done a top 10 of parental rights bills that are coming forward, which a lot of those are moving towards us, that we're going to be debating over the next couple of weeks. I didn't even mention ACA 4, which allows felons to vote in prison, right? Yes. Which also is moving to the Assembly
which
floor.
Again is another right that was negotiated for them to get the sentence that they received.
Right. So, I mean, there's a mental health bond. I mean, there's a lot of other things that are happening that aren't in this top 10. I will do 5 quick honorable mentions for bills that will not be moving forward, and I'll just go through these really quickly. There's 2 school bonds that were held in suspense that are not going to be going to the voters, at least this year. We're not going to be voting on those. AB 1657, which is a affordable housing bond, will not be moving forward. The one I'm really upset about is AB 19, that would have required Narcan in all of our schools. Again, a policy that keeps kids safe in the classroom if there is a fentanyl overdose. This one is so easy to me. I mean, school districts across the state are already moving in this direction.
Why not help them again?
I mean,
what kind of price tag do you put on a life that you could be saving? Yeah, I'm
just
pretty sure
and it's not even an expensive policy. I mean, supplying Narcan at school campuses is very doable. So very, very frustrated that one was held. SB 15, which is another Senator Grove bill that tries to get to the bottom of how much it's costing the state to continue importing oil from other countries instead of actually producing clean oil in California.
Well, see, that goes to the data thing again. They don't want us to know the data because it's going to be in our favor.
Yeah, very frustrating. And then SCA 3, which this is one of those bills that I just want to see this happen one day. But I don't know if you've heard about SCA 3, but it's actually by our colleague, Senator Roger Nilo, who is actually my state senator in my district, that would transfer the person that writes the title and summary on our propositions, right, is the Attorney General. It's a partisan official. It's been used by Democrats and Republicans in past administrations to kind of skew proposition language. I mean,
like safe schools and safe neighborhoods.
Famously, right? Proposition 47, the Safe Schools and Neighborhoods Act, that was anything but those things, right?
Lie.
This would actually transfer the person that's actually writing those titles and summaries to the nonpartisan legislative analyst's office. It is probably, in my mind, one of the more important policies that we need just to make sure that voters are getting accurate information when they actually go to the ballot box. And so, sadly, that one will not be moving forward this year either. But I'm hoping he will keep trying to move that one forward. All right, that's our top 10. Last topic under our looking ahead segment. I wanted to ask you about this because I know it's a huge priority for you. But this podcast will be released after this happens, but we're going to be forcing a vote this week on ACA 12.
ACA 12.
So tell us a little about ACA 12 and why we need to pass this immediately.
So ACA 12 is just another bill towards the right direction with fentanyl. It's to give so like when you get a DUI, or when somebody gets a DUI in court, the judge will read them. If you do this again, you'll get charged with murder, basically giving them a warning of what will happen to you if this happens again. This is what we're doing with fentanyl now. If this happens again, that you'll get charged with murder. And it gives a warning. It's like a warning you see like on anything, like may cause cancer or all these other things, but this is for fentanyl. And right now, agencies, district attorneys, right now, especially like in my district, they're having this language in there, but it's given as part of their pleading process. So it's not something legislative that comes through. It's just something that part of their plea, they're told, hey, you've accepted that you understand that you're going to get charged with murder if this, and this happen involving fentanyl. And I've been hearing this throughout the state. This is what they're doing just to get that in there to make that happen and do what they can to make things right. And so we're trying to make it right up here by letting the voters actually decide that is something we should do. So statewide,
Yeah.
I would say that would kind of take the burden off the assembly. Just say, hey, we're okay with letting the voters decide. I just need to get them to agree to say, let it be on the ballot.
But it just seems like such a, I mean, again, common sense. Common sense policy.
Common sense.
So what's the holdup? I mean, why isn't it moving forward?
Well, some people feel it's too harsh, that it's like a sentencing, adds days to it or anything. It's just a warning.
If you
educational.
deal a fentanyl pill to someone, let's say a high school student that takes that pill and passes away from that pill, which is something that is playing itself over and over again in a lot of our districts, tragic deaths of young kids. I mean, you should probably be charged with murder, in my opinion. So, it's amazing to me that there are people that say, maybe not.
So in your example, say that's their first offense.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when they take whatever plea or whatever they're going to get, then this comes into play. Okay, you do this again, and you will get charged with murder. You will this, and this. We don't have that. That's what we're trying to get.
I mean, it's crazy. So we are we're forcing a vote on this on Tuesday, correct? Today. Is that correct? Yeah. So we're recording this on Tuesday. The episode will come out on Thursday. But I think it's important that we're forcing this vote, and I think it's important that we're sending the message that we are fighting for Californians and making sure we're protecting.
And more importantly, you're going to actually see who the we is that are fighting for this on the vote. So you're going to actually see who is in favor of doing this, who is really truly wanting to fight fentanyl. Even this little gesture or educational thing, who's really going to want to do it and put their name on it. So we're going to find that out today.
Yeah, good. So we'll report back in the future on how that goes.
Hopefully things go well.
I hope people do the right thing. I mean, kind of similar to that human trafficking bill that we that was a big victory by there was bipartisan engagement to get that thing across the finish line. This is another area we desperately need bipartisan engagement. We talked about those 7 or 8 or whatever it was fentanyl bills requiring education and things like that. Those are great. But like if we don't actually start going after the criminal side of the fentanyl issue, we're going to continue to see it invading our communities. So,
correct.
All right. That wraps up our serious segments. Our final segment, just for fun. I am a huge Parrot Head, huge Jimmy Buffett fan.
Are you really?
Okay, dude. Since I was a kid.
Really?
I saw him in 2016 when he came to Sacramento. Love him. I just love him so much. I know it's super weird. My kids make fun of me for it because they're like every year, like my Spotify top 5, it'll be like hip hop and like some other stuff, and then Jimmy Buffett. And my kids are like, "What do you listen to? Like, I don't understand your musical taste." It's weird. But 76 years old, Jimmy Buffett passed away last week.
Unfortunately,
very sad. So with that in mind, what is your favorite Jimmy Buffett song? And I was curious if you had a favorite Jimmy Buffett song.
So obviously everybody's going to go to Margaritaville because that's what everybody knows. But just listening to some of those the words in that song, like, does that really make sense? Am I really singing what the words are to it? So I can't go there.
All right.
But I will go with "It's 5 o'clock somewhere," even though he sang it with another person, with Alan Jackson. But I would say 5 o'clock somewhere.
That's a great song,
and I think it's pretty fitting up here in Sacramento too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because I usually hear that a lot. Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, 5 o'clock somewhere is a super fun song.
It is.
And the thing with Jimmy is, I love Margaritaville too, but I think it's funny like. People are like celebrating the Margaritaville song as like, oh, let's drink margaritas and have a good time. But like the song isn't really about that. It's about like, I think like him breaking up with a woman or something and like it being his fault, it's more of a regretful song, right? I love both of those songs, but I've got a bunch of I've got a bunch of favorites. I can't narrow it down to one, but
Really?
I'm a big, like, he went to Paris. I actually still sing that one to my son at night, bedtime sometimes, which is kind of funny. And then Pirate Looks at 40, Son of a Sailor. I don't know. There's a bunch of them, man. I could go on.
I don't think I've heard any of those.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because they're not the party songs. They're like, he's got some really serious, like, meaningful songs, right?
See, and me this whole time, I was just this guy that made it this long on just Margaritaville.
There you go. See, now you're gonna have to dive into his collection a little bit.
I'm gonna have to listen to
He's
that
actually a pretty thoughtful guy. Also, a very successful guy. You know, for a guy that kind of sold this flip flop and
the beach bum
lifestyle. I mean, he's probably like the richest pirate of all time. You know, he's like worth $1 billion and.
Watch out, Jack Sparrow.
Exactly. But anyway, R.I.P. to Jimmy Buffett. Just thought I'd get your take on that. So we're going to wrap up for today. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, just thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
Again, like we mentioned during this podcast, look at the people that you elect, see which way they go, and see if they need to deserve your support next time or not.
Well, and just keep engaged with them. Hold them accountable for what they're voting on and how they're voting. I think it's really important because we have to make sure that our communities are safe. So good way to end the show. If you have ideas for future shows, you can email pointoforderpod@gmail.com. You can listen. Please listen and follow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Watch us on YouTube at Point of Order Pod, and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at Point of Order Pod. You can also follow today's hosts, myself on Twitter at Joshua_Hoover, and Juan at Juan Alanis CA, I believe is yours. So yeah, thanks for coming on, Juan. I really appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for having me. See you later.